Hi, I'm Anna Woods, and welcome to Let's Chat About It. Today, I will chat with Desiree Snore. We will talk about the profound impact of mentorship and mentee. We will dive into a discussion that will enhance our ability to move through our mental wellness in a way that's healthy for us. We'll also talk about legacy and the power of storytelling. And we'll combine that with a conversation on grief and the impact of grief on our mental wellness and some of the things that you can even do to help your mental wellness. Again, I'm Anna Woods. Let's chat about it. Welcome. Hello, Desiree, and welcome to Let's Talk About It, where we will dive deeper into mentorship and its powerful impact on how we build resilience throughout our lifetime. So, welcome to the show, and let's hear a little something about you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Miss Anna. I'm so happy to be here. So my name is Desiree, and I am a mom of four. I coach women and support them and encourage them on their journey to really be empowered around the changes that life brings. And instead of seeing change as a challenge or being defeated by change, really embracing, allowing yourself to be changed by change. So I'm glad to be here and talk about the relationship that you and I have built over the past decade.
Wonderful. So, Desiree and I have quite a long history. We actually met at a mentorship program that was called Three Strand Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is in those transitional times in our life where we discover how critical having a mentor is. So, what inspired you to be a mentor or to seek a mentee?
Yeah, so I think it was in 2015. I was at that point a mom of three. I had been married for a few years, and being a young mom and kind of transitioning from a younger woman to an older woman, I really realized how much I needed other women, right? And that also other women need the support and the encouragement of other women as well. So I think that's something that mentors, even though they might not have been called that or in such a formal setting, I think women needing other women and women supporting other women is something that has taken us through the span of time, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So with Three Strand, the way that we kind of had it set up, there was a younger woman, a kind of a woman in the middle, maybe in her 30s, and then older women. And it wasn't a hierarchy, right? There's no person that's telling the other women what to do or giving all the advice or sharing all the wisdom. It's really a two-way street, right? Because we know that we all have something that we can learn and we all have something that we can share.
Yeah. So, when I think about mentorship and legacy, I really think about my own parents, right? So I think my mother was always a mentor. It wasn't called that back in the day, but she always had women at her feet because she was a woman that walked with God. And so whether she was baking a cake or taking someone to a doctor's appointment or whatever the case may be, I think I have lived a life of mentorship through watching my mother and my father. And so for me, mentorship came naturally, and so does life coaching. And so I think those were natural transitions for me. So when you and I connected, it was almost an instant and natural process to connect with other women. And really the uniqueness of connecting with women of all ages, right?
Yeah.
So I think we learn from others as much as we give, right? Sure. So it is a collective relationship when you have a mentor-mentee relationship. And so some of the most valuable lessons that I have learned through being a mentor is really the ability to listen and be judgmental, non-judgmental, right? And so there's so much freedom and so much power in the place to sit with others and have a non-judgmental approach. What's some of the lessons that you've learned from being in this relationship?
Yeah. I think for me, thinking back to how you and I connected, and even from when I was a teenager and in college, really seeking out women of all ages to really kind of model after, whether it's personally, professionally, or spiritually. I found that I've always been seeking that out. I've always wanted to be able to see, oh, this is the kind of woman I want to be, right? This certain thing about this woman, like if I can see it, then maybe I can be like that too, right? And so I think it's really just kind of the biggest thing for me has been possibilities being illuminated for me. Right?
Wow.
It's been really important to say there's not one specific woman in my life who has it all, right?
Right.
But if I can piece these things together about a woman, I really like her work ethic, and I really love her, the way, the job that she does, and this woman's wisdom, and how this woman cooks well, whatever it is, right? Yeah. I've always been trying to build the woman that I am by looking at other women that are important to me.
Well, that's a beautiful way to look at it because, as we look at life itself, all of our journeys are very different because we all see life very different. And so to be able to draw from a variety of women as you shape and mold your own life, I think it's a powerful way to begin. I think the other side of this is how, as mentee and mentors, that we build trust in our relationship, which means that we can be vulnerable, right? We can come to these conversations, be authentically who God has created us to be. And I think that's a beautiful thing, as it deepen our understanding of one another and our own lives. Yeah. So I think that's a powerful way. Part of our journey also has encompassed you participating in the grief recovery program that I facilitate as a grief coach. And so when you think about loss and grief and healing, during the most difficult times in our life. And so what I've really found, even in that journey, is that healing comes from facing the difficult stuff, right? Not running away from it, but instead embracing the difficult stuff. And so most of what comes to us as difficult challenges in our life helps us build the resilience that's necessary to be strong women, right? Yeah. And so even if we look at it from a biblical perspective, right? So we're thrown in the fire and we're refined by the challenges that we face in our life. God takes us through those challenges. He don't allow us to skip over those if we want to grow and become whole. So as you look at your difficult times and the loss and grief that you have experienced, what advice would you give others?
Such a good question. And there's so much I think I would want to say there. I think first and foremost, it's what you said. You having the perspective of this is an opportunity for me to grow. This is an opportunity for me to learn. This is an opportunity for me to get better. If there's a way that you can grab hold of that, even in the midst of when things are really, really hard, then that perspective change can really help you gather everything that you need to gather from that situation. And not like faking it, right? If things are really hard and things are really painful, things are really disappointing. And I think you should feel those feelings and feel them to get through them, right? Yeah. I know that we talked about that a lot in grief recovery. There's so much shame and shielding I think we try to do away from these deep emotions. And I think if we don't shy away and we actually go into them, there's so much discovery to be made about who we are and the depths of our spirit and the depths of our soul and the depths of our possibility of who we can be. Yeah.
So let's unpack that. Feel the emotions, right? Because that kind of becomes cliche-ish almost, right? So what does feeling the emotions mean? So for me, feeling the emotions mean that I'm going to sit in this space where I feel emotional pain. I'm not going to try to push it down, to shove it to the side. I'm going to allow the tears to flow. I'm going to cry because Jesus wept. I'm allowed to shed my tears. I'm allowed to be angry because even Jesus turned over the table at the temple gate, right? So when we talk about feel the emotions, we're talking about sitting in that moment of deep pain, which is very, very challenging. And allowing ourselves to feel everything that comes to us as humans, right? And so I think when we talk about feel the emotions, we really want to suggest that you sit in those emotions. And if the tears come, allow them. If you feel angry, scream. right?
Yeah.
If you need to reach out to someone else, do so, right? Whatever it is that your body is asking you to do, do that. So that's an internal, right, mechanism that we all have the power and we all possess that, but we often don't tap into it.
Yeah. And like we talked about in your class, we're not taught to do that. We don't see that modeled, right?
Right.
If we're raised around strong women, you don't see cry. If you're raised around strong
That's
men,
correct.
they don't cry. So you haven't been shown how to cry. You haven't been shown that that's okay. You haven't been shown that that's even productive, right? Crying is productive.
It is productive.
There's a reason why our body biologically is
Yes.
telling us to do that.
Yeah.
The cleansing, the right, the clearing, all of that is a real thing. And so I think not only do we don't feel comfortable with it, we're not even sure about all of its benefits. We haven't seen it. And so mentorship again shows you different things that you might not have been exposed to, especially around grief, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you bring up a great point. When you look at generational grief or collective grief, what we're really taught is to inhibit our grief, is to avoid our emotions, is to stay away from the soft things that we feel inside of us. And I'll be the first to say that although my mother was my first mentor, my mother was not a crier. My mother was very strong. So culturally, we come into this experience with be strong, right? And that to show emotions is weakness. But now through this journey that you and I have both had, we know that to be weak is really to be strong. Yeah. To cry really gives you superpower because it cleanses your body and it actually changes your perspective on the way that you see grief. Also, resilience is the essence of the struggle, right? It is in the struggle that we build resilience, which is why it's so critical that we feel all the feelings, right? Yeah. That we allow, and it is allowing and giving ourselves permission to feel our emotions. So culturally, I'm glad you brought that up. No, we were not taught, not even what grief is. And so I am compelled to always say that grief is a normal and natural response to a significant loss of any kind, not just death and divorce. So culturally, you look at grief always centered around death and divorce. And so I'm ecstatic when I do a workshop or have a conversation with someone and I engage in the conversation about grief and I share with them that grief is a mirage of all types of things that we experience in our life. And so, great conversation on the generational differences. What have you seen in your lifetime that you can refer to as generational differences for yourself?
Just what you talked about. You talked about your parents a little bit. I have, in terms of my parents, I've seen maybe my dad cry once. And my dad does not talk about his emotions around hardly anything. My mom, I've seen my mom cry, but my mom, I never really even thought about this. I don't know that I saw her crying as very productive though. I don't know if it was actually very cleansing. I'm not sure if I saw her doing the work around the things that the crying could have produced.
Right.
If that makes sense. Yeah. You don't walk around and tell your kids hey, so when something bad happens to you, this is how you grieve. You don't really do that. So so many other things, we learn by observing. We learn by modeling. Yeah. And so, I did see my mom, go in her room and cry freely. She was free with her emotion. I don't know that I saw some of the other things. So I didn't really see her talking to other women about things. I didn't see her journaling through. My mom didn't go to therapy. These things weren't normalized in our home. And so it's interesting when we talk about resilience, right? As you were talking, I was thinking, how does one get more resilient? Like, how do you build that? Resilience is like an admirable trait. Like, people want to be resilient. You want to be able to come back from the things that, break us down or kind of come against us in life. And so, I think that resiliency can actually be a practice, right? I think that there are ways that we can learn to trust ourselves along the way, build confidence. And for me, that's looked like journaling. I've always written my feelings.
Right.
I'm an internal processor that way, and then I externally process with others too. But first and foremost, I think the most revelation for me has come through writing, and asking myself kind of like, why am I feeling that? And then why am I feeling that layer? And then what's that layer? Right? Almost as a discovery. And I realized that I like that kind of thing. I like to know why I'm feeling the things I'm feeling.
Yes.
As much as some people push that away, I'm actually very interested in that and always have been about myself. And even in the hard times, and even in the hard things where it's hard to ask myself those questions, and the things that I'm discovering might be painful, it's still worthwhile to me to know who's in there, to know that, right?
Yeah, great point. And in actual fact, my journey began around the curiosity around grief, right? So my mother died and the world turned upside down for me.
Yeah.
And so my question for myself was, what is this that I feel? It was foreign to me.
The curiosity.
The curiosity about the emotion, right? And so I began to ask those questions to go deeper inside, because the journey to resilience is an internal journey first, right? And it manifests itself on the outside as the resilience take hold. But we have to face the pain. We have to sit with it. We have to acknowledge it. We have to be able to talk about the emotions in order to move to resilience, right? Resilience is a journey. It's a process.
Yeah.
And so with each challenge that we face in our life, we become more and more resilient. And at some point, we never return to that previous state, right?
Yeah.
We continue the growth pattern as long as we face those emotions, sit with those emotions, acknowledge those emotions, and work on them in whatever way that works for you. For you, it's journaling. For me, it was, oh my goodness, it was certification as a grief coach, or certification as a life coach, or certification as a trauma-informed specialist. Going back to school to get a master's in ministry to understand how God's word speaks to our human emotions. So for me, my curiosity led me on that type of journey, right? And now today I do more reading and studying to further understand even the how we form resilience for ourselves, and how does it begin at an early age. So, but what I understand about it all at this point is, the pain has a purpose, and our pain actually can become our superpower. If we can just pause for a moment and realize that everything in our life has purpose. And everything in our life is leading us in a direction that God is pointing for us to go. Now, as I understood or have begun to understand on this journey, loss and grief, I also tapped into a well of what I would call the wellness journey, right? And the more I felt whole, the more well I felt within myself, right? And so our wellness journey looks just as different as our grief journey. So for me, my wellness journey includes, daily Bible reading, participating in Sunday school, spending time with the elderly, walking or running 4 or 5 times a week, right? Spending a day in my house in complete and total silence, all leads me to this place of wellness, right? And so wellness is very multifaceted. What are some of the things that you do that have contributed to your own wellness?
Yeah, it's interesting because, wellness and grief might be two ends of the spectrum, right? But I find that I do the same things for both of those things, right? It is that internal process. It's the writing, it's walking, it's yoga, it's speaking to, having deep conversation with friends. It's making sure I'm resting a lot, so getting good sleep, feeding my body well, right? So those practices, like you said, the practices of resilience, because you never know what's coming for you. You never know what kind of day, right? And anything can happen, right? Especially the time that we live in now. There is so much just collective grief. There's personal grief.
Yeah.
There's so much collective joy as well.
Yeah.
There's personal joy.
Yep.
So kind of for both of those things, for me, I found that my practices cover it all, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And you mentioned the collective, I think we've said it a couple times, collective grief. So let me just say that collective grief is grief that we feel as a community,
Yeah.
A segment of people. Sometimes let's take the fires in California. Although we may not know anyone in California, collectively as a society, we all felt the pain of what was happening in California. So that's collective grief, right? So culturally, I think as a people, we feel a lot of collective grief around the things that we experience. And so while we look at that, there's also powerful stories that we've experienced in our lifetime that actually illustrate the power of healing, right?
Yeah.
Would you like to share such story for your own life?
Yeah. I'll say something before I answer that too. I think about when I said, collective grief and collective joy. I think probably my perspective as a woman, a millennial Black woman at the time that I live in, in just the 40 years that I've been alive, there has been so much change in our world. Like when I was a little kid,
Right.
we had not barely any technology, but compared to now, right?
Right.
We used to play outside. We didn't have a family computer. Like the TVs were the big TV, you just didn't have. You had the Blockbuster, whatever. And now there's so much that has happened. And we're still only 40. Like I still have a long life to live. So in all of those changes, I think it's important for me in my life and a part of my purpose and calling is really to elevate the voices of women and our experience and to share our narrative. Collectively, I think it's really important to kind of get back to some of those like basic things around community, conversation, empowering each other, letting each other's narratives and stories be told.
Right.
And so again, my writing is something that I used to kind of come back to that. And again, it starts personally, but whenever I read Black women writers, Black feminist writers, that collective heart and soul has been there since the beginning of time.
Yes.
And it's such an amazing feeling when I can read something that was written 30, 50, 100 years ago and connect to that same experience, even though I've never met them people. And
Always
even though I didn't live in that time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that collective voice is there. And so that really drives me, to be in mentor relationship, to be in community in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of that involves storytelling, right? So one of the things that come to mind for me is my father was a master storyteller, right? So much of who we become comes from our parents.
Yeah.
So as I think about my own grief, my own journey, and how I had to go look back in order to move forward, right? We can't ignore what has happened, right? We can't stay there, but we must reflect back in our life so we can heal ourselves from a generation sometimes of grief and trauma, right? So my father was a master storyteller, and had he not told the story of his biological mother who died when he was barely a teenager, and the story that he had been told and that he understood is that his biological mother died giving childbirth to his brother. And so as I reflected on my own journey and what happened to my biological grandmother is very similar to what happened to me as I gave birth to my last child. And so sometimes without those collective voices of the past, we don't know our medical history in order to pinpoint things that happens in our own lives. So having my father's voice, having my mother storytelling and her ability to be a mentor to so many women in the town that I'm from was powerful for me as a child.
Yeah.
So when I think about the power of storytelling and how important even this conversation is for your children and my children who will someday hear our voices in this conversation and what it will mean to them in their future, for their future selves, right?
Yeah.
The fact that we now, as opposed to our parents, can talk about our grief, can talk about those days where we feel fear, where we feel lonely, where we feel isolated, but can talk about the days where our lives were full of joy, right? And gratitude for all the struggles. And to assure them that on the other side of those struggles, there is joy, right? But they have to go through the struggle in order to build that resilience that's necessary to live a fruitful life. So thank you for talking about that generation of Black women, right? But Black men also, right? So it's kind of fascinating. When the last workshop I had a variety of age women at that workshop. And it's fascinating to see all the ages grab a hold of the thought of grief as a normal and natural response. It was like they had been given permission suddenly to feel the emotions that they brought to the workshop. And to leave knowing that they were okay, that their emotions that they feel are both normal and natural based on our own life experience. What do you think is a major misconception with people around grief? What do you think that is? And healing and mentorship, all those things. What do you think the major misconception is?
I think maybe that they won't be good at it, or they won't get it right, or that there's something hard about it that they have to, maybe even that they have to get it right.
Right.
Versus the journey of it. Right. I think sometimes people, if they're shown something about it, right, people may feel like, oh, my journey is not like hers, so mine won't be good enough or something enough. The comparison, right, right, maybe that. I think that,
there's something that I heard about comparison. That comparison is a thief of our joy. Because the moment we begin to compare ourselves to one another, we rob ourselves of who we really are and the joy that we contain and just being authentically who we are.
Yeah. I found that, and I wrote a blog post about this recently, that I think some people struggle with comparing themselves to others. But then for me, I've struggled with comparing myself, to a former self, or to some perceived self that I thought I should be, right? Oh, I must be behind schedule because by the time I was 30, I thought I would be that Desiree. Or, man, like, when I was 20, I used to be this Desiree, right? And then I'm stealing from myself, my present self. I'm not fully able to acknowledge and enjoy who I am right now because I'm worried about past Desiree or future Desiree and comparing to this idea that I have in my mind.
So even in that situation, you're allowing that to steal your joy in the present moment, right?
Yeah.
And so let me just add that as a senior in this conversation.
No. Really?
Yeah, really. that we grieve our former selves. We grieve the person we thought we would be versus the person that we really are, right?
We need to. We sometimes need to.
Yes. Sometimes we need to, and it's healthy to, but not to the point where we're comparing ourselves today as we age to our younger selves, because it's a natural process, right? Aging is just a part of God's design, just like the seasons are, right? So careful with that.
I know.
It'll steal your joy, right? So one of the things that I would say as a misconception about healing, mentorship, and grief is most people want it to be over with quick. right? They want the mentorships, relationships to develop quickly, and they don't.
Yeah.
It's like watching paint dry sometimes, right?
Yeah.
They want to heal from their pain and their grief quickly.
Just get over it.
Just get over it.
Let me get through this.
They want to just hurry up through it.
Sure.
Which means that they're not pausing and feeling the emotions. They're not sitting with that emotion that they feel. And at the same time, you don't want to stay there too long, because then you run the risk of having compound complex grief, which you don't want to go there either, right? So you want to feel it, you want to acknowledge it, but you don't want to tarry there for too long. You do have to move through it. It is designed to be able to move through it. And so all of these things, mentorship, resilience, grief, they all require time.
Yeah.
They require patience, and they require understanding that things don't always happen quickly. I mean, some people will grieve in a very short period of time, and some will grieve a little longer. Some mentorships will develop quickly, some will not. Some you have to work hard at. But I have found that the best relationships that I've had are those that no matter how much time going between us catching up, when we meet again, it's like no time has gone between the last time we talked. Yeah. And so that's even the beauty that we have in our own relationship. So that journey is powerful. The storytelling journey that we talked about is also a powerful way to keep memories alive for those that we love. As we wrap this up, if you could give one, maybe two, bit of advice to someone that's on a similar journey, or what would that be?
I'll talk a little bit about kind of, as we were talking about the process of grief, the process of building resilience. One thing that is kind of a tool that has worked for me has been kind of, as I realized I needed to go back and do a lot of healing for little girl Desiree.
Yes.
It made sense to me to say, like, okay, thinking of these certain mile markers in my life, almost of the timeline, how we did in grief recovery, right? The timelining, these things have happened in my life, going back and saying, okay, 6-year-old Desiree, come here. 9-year-old Desiree, come here. 19-year-old Desiree, come. And in my mind, it made sense of literally the process of bringing her to me, right? I had to kind of go and gather her. Maybe she was feeling left, neglected, misunderstood. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she was sad. And grabbing her and bringing her to me helped me be present at that time, 37-year-old Desiree, as I was going through my divorce, right? I had to go back and gather myself to me now. And doing the work of that and looking at myself in the mirror literally and asking myself questions and not pulling back and saying, why do I feel that way?
Right.
Why has this affected me this way? What do I need that I don't have? And how can I get it? Right? Doing all of that. So nowadays, more often I'm able to kind of turn and pivot and look forward to 40. I'll be 40 in like a few days. I can't believe it's here. But 50-year-old Desiree, 60, 70, 80-year-old Desiree, who do I want to be now? Right? Because I've done that. I've gathered her to me now and we're here, right? We're good, mostly. And so now I look forward and say, what can I do? Right? Those practices we talked about. Right. What do I do to make sure I get to 80-year-old Desiree? She's there on the porch. She's in her garden. She still goes to yoga. Like she's sitting and drinking her tea and there's women around her. Right? Yeah. How do I get to her? Yeah. These decisions that I'm making in the life that I'm living, how do I make sure that I get to 80-year-old Desiree? Who is she? And making her real, right? And using my mentors, using these women and saying like, I want to be like Miss Anna, who's in her garden, who's out by the pool watering her orchids, who's, living a life that she loves with her husband, who's traveling and visiting her kids. Like, those are the things I want. How do I get there? Yeah. So that process has helped me build the confidence, build the self-trust, build the resilience, and given me like a perspective of now the future Desiree and how do I get to her?
Beautiful. That was a great imagery of the younger Desiree. And frankly, most of where we get stuck at in this journey is we're stuck at that younger person,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's the 8-year-old or the 12-year-old or the 13-year-old, wherever that place is,
Yeah.
where you had that traumatic experience
Yeah.
or that grieving experience that you
Yeah.
didn't grieve
Yeah.
over.
It's probably a lot of places, honestly.
It's a lot of
Probably
places,
a lot of places.
all along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so we get stuck in all those places.
Yeah.
And I think that's the incredible tool of grief recovery is it allows you to go back on a timeline and kind of look at those places in your life that you could potentially be stuck.
Yeah.
And become unstuck, right? In those places. And that way you don't have to act out as a 8-year-old having a temper tantrum, right?
Right.
As an adult,
Right.
right? An 8-year-old in a 40-something body, right?
Yeah.
Acting like an 8-year-old that looks very different in adults, right? We
Yeah.
see it all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty powerful perspective. And really the perspective of the younger generation really does matter. You
Yeah.
know, that connection between those of us who have passed that age of 40 and moving closer to 70, right? I think if I was going to leave with this conversation with the things that I would tell my younger self, right,
Mm.
is to own your voice.
Mm.
Own your voice. You know, don't allow people to stifle who you are at the
Yeah.
very core of who you are.
Yeah.
Because we spend a lot of time trying to find our voices, right?
Mm.
So own the voice at every age. And so I very much came out of a corporate environment that was all men. And so sometimes it was very difficult to own your voice.
Sure.
And so people will often want to make you feel small, but at the core of who you are, if you always remember to own your voice at every age, and don't be afraid to take up space and advocate for yourself,
Yeah.
right? But in order to do that, we have to go within to know who we are and what we desire for our life. And better yet, what we don't desire for our life is equally
Yep.
as important, right? So the next generation needs to know your perspective as a almost 40-year-old. And then the next generation also needs to know my perspective
Yeah.
as a almost 70-year-old, right? In a couple of years. My kids tell me, "Oh, I can't believe you're almost 70, Mom." Yes, almost. And so I think this collaboration through generations is just a powerful tool. I think storytelling will preserve our legacy long after
Mhm.
we're gone in the way that my mother and father legacy has been preserved, right? So legacy is not just about money. Legacy is the memories of sitting at the dinner table after Sunday service, the singing that my father and my grandfather did, the way that my father prayed, and the fact that both my parents, they went to church with us. That's legacy for me.
Yeah.
We sat together through church service. We went to Bible study together. So that's legacy for me. And so the simple truth of it all is that when we connect in that way, we become unstoppable. As human,
Yeah.
as a culture, as women,
Yeah.
we become unstoppable. And so part of my role is to help others navigate life challenges. I'm here for it, right? Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
I had a little something that I wrote that I wanted to pull up as you mentioned legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me just 1 second. I was talking about why I write and
Mhm.
what it means to me.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're talking about the way that memories are preserved
Mm-hmm.
and what writing does for healing and all of that. So I said, writing is a real-time spilling out of a moment into words, onto paper, capturing a right now you, sealing a memory forever in a way that nothing else can. Words are indeed created for the writer, a holding place, a repository, words for us and by us. Readers as an audience you see only get to glimpse in later as through a window. Writing to the writer is a memory holder. Writing to the writer is a mile marker. Writing to the writer is a mirror. So I write not to create perfectly polished presentation. I write to reread, to feel my old self, to be able to go back and see how far I have come. I write as a way to kneel down to my younger self, give her a hug, and tell myself that there is more life to live, baby, and you're going to love it here.
Wonderful. Very good. Very good.
Thank
Awesome. What an awesome way to end. So Desiree writes to heal herself now and her younger self.
And my future self.
And her future self. Great talking to you,
yes, thank you so much.
Desiree. It's always a pleasure to connect and reconnect on this journey that we call life. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming to Let's Chat About It, right? Yeah. Let's, as my boys would say, let's chat it up. That's Bermudian. We're having a conversation. Let's chat it up. And so, gosh, it was a great conversation. So I look forward to catching up with you again, okay?
Yeah,
thank you so much. Bye-bye now. Bye.